Hello everyone, I'm here today with my friend Adam Kelwick. Adam, first of all, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Adam Kelwick. I'm a Muslim chaplain, and when people ask me what do I do, it can sometimes be difficult, so I say I do too much and not enough.
Right.
But I'm involved in a few different things here and there, mainly with a focus on service to people. I like to try and help people who are in difficulty.
And you're called an imam.
People do call me an imam, but if I'm honest, it's not a title which I like to call myself.
It's not self-ascribed.
No, and the reason for that is because the concept of an imam in the Muslim tradition literally means a leader, somebody who leads the prayers, and so anybody can be an imam. Islam in the UK, we don't have the hierarchy what many Christian denominations have, and so it's a really difficult one to control. There aren't any bodies, for example, which will check whether a person is a qualified imam or not, and so I try and avoid the title. Muslim chaplain, I'm a qualified chaplain, I've got a certificate, I trained on that course, and so
right.
I don't mind using that title.
So you're good with chaplain.
Yeah.
So Adam, you just got back from Mosul. What were you doing in Mosul?
I was on a humanitarian mission there with Human Relief Foundation, which is a British charity. We have an office over in Iraq, in Erbil, which is in northern Iraq. And the reason I went over was to help with the emergency response, which Human Relief Foundation is currently involved in. Now, not many people know, because for whatever reason it's not in the media, but the situation in the city of Mosul, which until recently was Iraq's third largest populated city, is very, very dire. And not only is it a humanitarian crisis, but it's on the verge of being an even bigger humanitarian crisis. And the United Nations are saying within the next few days, we can even expect another 250,000, that's 250,000 human beings like me and you, having to flee the city of Mosul and start living in these camps, several of which we visited and did emergency food distributions, and the conditions there, we wouldn't wish them on anybody who we know.
So for people who can't maybe picture it, what are the conditions like? How are people living?
Well, there are two elements to the crisis in Mosul. The first is for those who are still in the city of Mosul. We do know the majority of people have left and have fled, and 150,000 people is the latest figure, have fled the city of Mosul, and then they're based in camps, makeshift camps, all on the outskirts of the Nineveh, or the Nineveh in English region, the ancient city of Nineveh. And so basically you're walking into a desert, sand everywhere, tents everywhere, a tent city, and all these families are crammed into these tents, and that's where they live. When we were there on the ground, just a few days before we arrived, it was actually one of the coldest recorded temperatures for that region that they've ever faced. It was snowing. Old people in that region, they said, we've never seen snow before. And so the situation is really, really dire and really terrible. And that's why we went over. We've got projects which distribute blankets and food packs and water and other essentials, which, let's be honest, they're not going to transform the lives of these people. They're not going to give them everything back that they've lost. But at least it will make their situation a little easier, and that's the hope.
I saw, watching some of the footage that you posted on Facebook, I saw lots of kids. Is there lots of kids?
There are. The majority of people in those camps are women and children, by far. And once again, it's a case of innocent people being caught up in the politics of these greedy individuals, no matter what side they're on or no matter what cause they claim to be representing. The reality, if this is the result of their endeavours, then I think they need to question themselves and how they justify and what kind of banners they're flying and what good claims they're making for these endeavours. That's just a personal reflection.
while you were there, you put something on Facebook about being very close to some dangerous situations. I mean, you probably can't say maybe much about that, but you were quite close to some pretty scary stuff.
We have a very experienced team on the ground in Mosul, and our Iraq office has over 25 years of experience. And so, first of all, they didn't allow us to access the places where we accessed, except when the security clearance came back as okay, and the situation is good. The security situation did deteriorate while we were on the ground. In fact, we were very close to an explosion. Before that explosion happened, we were already given the order to leave Mosul as soon as possible, because we were informed that the security situation has deteriorated. And then we just heard this huge boom. We were on our way out, speeding out, and then within the hour we found out that there were reports of 3 suicide car bombings in the city of Eastern Mosul, which is the liberated part, the part which ISIS had fled from, and which was safe up until those operations. And so we found out on the way out that actually there had been 3 suicide car attacks, and one of them was very close to where we were, and probably the explosion which we heard.
Wow. We've known each other for about 3-4 years, something like that, through stuff that we've done together at the university, and I think my respect for you keeps sort of going up a couple of notches. I mean,
likewise.
Yeah. But oftentimes I have lots of friends who maybe don't have friends like you, Muslim friends that they know and talk to, and they can hear experiences and opinions from a Muslim friend. And oftentimes I've wanted to just sort of transport you and put you in front of people to be able to say, here's even though there's all this stuff that always goes on in the media about Islam, here's my friend Adam, you should chat with him. He'll give you a different perspective. The media can sometimes be really unhelpful, especially lately when it comes to Islam. What would you say to some of my friends maybe that have a hard time making a distinction between Islam and these more radical expressions,
The first thing to bear in mind is that when we look at extremism and terrorism, which are very heavily part of this international narrative right now. So when people talk about Muslims in the media, in the mass media, unfortunately it's usually within this context of extremism and terrorism. First things first, I'd just like to remind everybody that if we're talking realistically about numbers, the numbers of these people are very, 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 very small in terms of from being within the Muslim community. The vast majority of the Muslim community will all be speaking out against extremism, all be speaking out against terrorism. And on top of that, we have people coming to us saying, why don't you speak out about this? And the issue is, we are speaking out about this by day and by night, because this negative press and this negative image is not affecting anybody except us. The only problem is, we're speaking out, but nobody wants to listen. It's not going to sell a newspaper to say Muslim from Liverpool goes over to Iraq and saves lives by giving people food and water. But imagine if I went over to join ISIS and be a terrorist and blow somebody up. Imagine what headlines that would get, not just in the UK but around the whole world. And unfortunately, this is one of the challenges which we're facing at the moment. This negative image of Islam and of Muslims in general. My advice to people would be, they say, don't judge a book by its cover. Definitely don't judge the Sun or the Times by their headlines.
Right.
Meet a Muslim. Meet a Muslim. Find somebody who's a religious Muslim as well, especially because it's the religion which is often blamed for many of these different incidents, what we see. Sit down with them. And one thing you'll notice very, very quickly is that they're a human being like you. They love their children and they want the best for their kids like you. They want to have a career in which they're comfortable and can progress and do really well. They get stressed out by getting high mobile phone bills and balancing the budgets at the end of the month. In other words, Muslims are
Humans.
humans too. And I think this is what people need to do. And in all honesty, if I didn't know any Muslims and I only had the newspapers or the media as my source of information on what Muslims are, I think I'd be fearful, scared of, and probably dislike lots of Muslims too. So it's about rising above that and finding out for oneself.
Right. One of the other things that I'm constantly thinking about is when the narrative of fear takes over, whether it's through media, through people talking. Sometimes I worry that in some populations there could be an overreaction where there's sort of almost like an over harsh crackdown. I mean, that's not probably the right word, and that maybe. I mean, there might be a possibility that we create a self-fulfilling prophecy because of alienation between groups and fear between groups. Do you think there's anything there?
I think people would do good to try and put themselves in other people's shoes. So try and imagine what things are like from their perspective. And so if you're a minority, a religious minority in a country who in general, I'm talking about the Muslim community here, lower educational attainment than average, less employment opportunities, all these things have been proven by statistics, real identity issues, not knowing, am I British, am I Muslim, who am I? And on top of that, a very, very large top-down program which is looking at surveillance and mapping and rooting out the terrorists within. I think there's a real danger that what you can be doing is marginalising this minority community even further. And I always used to say, years ago, I used to be stopped whenever I came back into the UK. When I say stopped, I don't mean for 2 minutes. I was taken into a separate room. I'd be interrogated for an hour to 2 hours at a time. I'd never know. People stopped picking me up from the airport because they never knew how long I would be. And what I used to say to the officers who were questioning me there is, I'm okay. I'm a positive person. I can deal with how you're treating me in a positive way. But I'm sure there are going to be vulnerable and there are going to be sensitive people out there who, through this experience, my expectation would be for them to be even more inclined to extremism than they were before they had this experience with you. And I think that's something to think about. Are we even, by our hunting the extremists out in a way which is not conducive, are we even creating them or being part of a catalyst which is going to push them and marginalise them even more?
Right. Trying to find this balance between realizing that some people, not just Muslims, but some people get radicalized in every population, and an overreaction of fear could create a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think it's a real serious thing for us all to think about. To switch tracks just a little bit, fundamentally, you and I agree about one of the deepest and most important things in our lives, which is our faith. And I don't believe you're right, and you don't believe that I'm right. When it comes to interfaith dialogue, what do you think? What do you think is important?
I think from an Islamic perspective, interfaith dialogue is an obligation. Because we're told in several verses in the Quran, say to the people of the book, or discuss with them, or even debate with them, but in a way which is with the proper etiquette. So not argue with them and fall out with them and cause problems. So I think it's a religious obligation. However, saying that, I think a lot of initiatives which pass for interfaith today, I think there's a lot of progress to be made. What do I mean? I think if we were to take a snapshot of the average interfaith initiative in this country today, or even abroad, the chances are we're going to have a bunch of old men from the different religious backgrounds and they'll be drinking coffee and tea, which is good. It's a beautiful thing for all these people from different faiths to come together. But they'll all be giggling about, oh, we agree on everything. Isn't life so amazing? But the problem is there's a gap between these people who are meeting around the table and their respective congregations. So if you were to go to the Jewish rabbi's synagogue, or the Muslim imam's mosque, or the Christian priest's church, you would those ideas of tolerance, those ideas of discussion, those ideas of coming together despite our differences, they don't trickle down to their congregations. And so my idea of healthy interfaith initiatives are those where you are brave enough and trust each other enough to be able to discuss your differences. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, then you have to take these discussions and bring them back to your communities, bring them back to your congregation, so they can join you on this journey. So it's not about saying we're all the same. Of course, we have so many things in common, and the common ground is often a good way to start such discussions. But I think they're really mature and they're empowering when you can get to the level, as we have many times, where you can sit down and openly talk about your differences and that not lead to any aggression of any type. And I think that's healthy interfaith work.
So acknowledging deep difference and at the same time looking for common ground. In Christian theology, we often talk about this idea of the common good, and the common good is the good that's good for everybody, the good we hold in common. And I noticed a few of my friends recently on your trip commenting on your Facebook feed, wanting to donate to the projects that you have going on. And that's not to say they absolutely agree with your theology.
Of course.
What that is to say is that we have a common good to achieve, which is in this case a humanitarian disaster.
And this is the thing, my work out there, it wasn't religious per se, it was humanitarian. We were feeding people food, giving them water, providing them with blankets. It's not as if we're going out preaching religion and trying to get converts. And as I'm sure you've experienced, we have within our communities this zealous type of people who is also attracted to the interfaith setup, and they often have the potential to mess it up for everybody as well. So it's not necessarily about converting other people, it's about understanding and trust.
Right. One of the critical things of points of disagreement between you and I would be around the person of Jesus. I think on the one hand we have a significant disagreement about Jesus, but on the other hand, I found out 6 or 7 years ago, the more I began to explore it, that Muslims actually hold Jesus in esteem. What do you think about the person of Jesus?
I think, speaking to you as a Christian, I would expect that within Christian circles, when they discuss Muslim belief in Jesus, they would probably introduce it to each other as, well, Muslims believe in Jesus and they respect and they honor Jesus, but only as a prophet. I think that's how Christians would describe Muslim faith in Jesus to each other. What I would say is, I think it could be described differently. I think we could take the word only out of the sentence. Because although from a Christian perspective of having Jesus being part of the Godhead, and Jesus being either the Son or the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost or all in one, from a Muslim perspective, we don't say that Jesus is only a prophet. We say that Jesus is a prophet, and the rank of the prophets in Islam are the best of creation. So for us, God Almighty is the first and the last, the beginning without end, and so forth and so forth. And then from amongst all of the creation, after God is the creator, from amongst all of the creation, Jesus for us is at the highest echelons of possible existence. So for us, Jesus is he's considered to be, from the 5 great humans, the greatest humans who've ever walked on this planet. He's mentioned 25 times in the Quran. He's in the Quran he's called the Word of God. We know him as the Spirit of God. He was from the righteous. We believe in the virgin birth. We believe in his miracles. We consider
that's an interesting one. The Muslims believe in the virgin birth. I mean, that for us, that's a fairly significant thing, and it's interesting to hear you say that. Yeah,
and so we do. We believe in Jesus. We love Jesus. And even when it comes to the discussion of, okay, then we don't agree, I always have hope. And this is something which I always present to my Christian friends. And that is the return of Jesus, peace be upon him. Because even though we might not agree on the exact nature of Jesus Christ, and we can say that as Muslims, Al-Masih, the Messiah, in the Quran he's called the Messiah, then we do agree that he will return. And our hope and our prayer is, and as we're told in some of our prophecies, that Christians and Muslims will be united under Jesus when he does return.
Adam, very, very interesting. And let me just say, I really hope that your work goes well. From the bottom of my heart, I hope that your work goes well. I'm thankful for you as a person.